Welcome, everybody. I'm John Hinderaker, and I'm joined today by Kendall Qualls, the president of TakeCharge, and James Dickey, trial counsel at the Upper Midwest Law Center. And we're going to be talking about the fire that broke out at 202. Well, at least that I shouldn't say the fire broke out. The arsonist or arsonists broke into our building, 8421 Wayzata Boulevard, I believe at 2:02 a.m. on Sunday morning, January 28th. And whoever it was, one person or several people, started two different fires. And they were somewhat different, the fires, and they had somewhat different consequences. And I guess the one thing they had in common, though, is that these people obviously targeted the three conservative organizations that were located in that building, along with probably several dozen small businesses, and those are the three organizations run by us. hence our conversation here today. James, let's start with you, and let's talk a little bit about the fire that was set on the third floor. Do you have an understanding as to where that fire was actually set?
So it appears, based on having walked through it and the charred remains of what's left, that, as I understand it from the Golden Valley Police Department, Fire Department, that there was gasoline used. And I don't know if they broke in our door at this point or if they just poured it underneath the door frame, essentially, and then lit it. But it seems like that's the most likely origin for our fire.
So I've seen what your office looks like after the fire. Can you just describe it in general terms?
Like I said, charred remains of what is left. Everything is pretty much entirely destroyed in the front part of the office, which is where our office manager would normally sit. And it's jarring when you see that because you think someone sits there. Like our printer melted down entirely in the front area of the office there. We have a water cooler, those old water coolers. Talk about having conversations around the water cooler. Well, the entire bottle, those big jugs of water that go in the top of that was totally melted down to like the size of a baseball. And so throughout the entirety of our office, we experienced what appears to be near total losses. There were a few pieces of memorabilia that may have survived as a result of it, and some family heirlooms, thankfully, that were not destroyed, which I'm really grateful for. But overall, it looks like the burned out husks of what used to be an office, but it's really bad.
So I've always assumed that the arsonist broke into your office because the destruction there is quite different from the destruction on the ground floor, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. And the way I've always reconstructed the crime, they start on the third floor. Well, you would. If you started the first floor, you're blocking your own escape of fire, So obviously the arsonist or arsonists would start on the third floor, and they want to get in and get out, but they've got some time. They haven't burned anything yet, right? So the way I've always reconstructed it, they break in your door, they put gasoline all over, and they light a couple of matches, and your office is completely destroyed. Does that make sense to you?
It does. I mean, so further support for that would be that the door itself does appear like it's half burned off. So I don't know if that was because it was broken first and then the fire was lit. The only reason why I suspect that it might have been set with the door shut is that the back part of the office, which is where a couple of personal items that I was able to salvage were, and where Doug's seat and stuff is less damaged than the front part of the office closer to the door. So if the fire started outside, that would be, it could burn everything up very close. But if they didn't use gasoline all the way into the back of the office, then maybe maybe that's evidence that it was actually started outside. It just happened to be really, really hot and burned the door up.
So in any event, once they start that fire, now they're on the clock. It's not going to be very long before somebody notices flames or notices smoke. So now you can picture them hurrying down the stairs. And your office is directly above ours, but 2 floors up, right? Our old office. So they hurry down the stairs to the ground floor. And there they do not break into either our office or your office, right, Kendall?
Correct.
What they do instead is they pour gasoline all over the place in the corridor, and they light a match or they light several matches. And when I first heard about the fire, Kendall, and I heard that it had not actually penetrated the wall into our office, I kind of underestimated it. And I'll tell you, what I saw what that corridor actually looks like, I was stunned.
The whole corridor literally seemed like it was completely gutted.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, our doors are fireproof doors, so it protects things inside the offices. But everything else in the corridor is completely demolished.
Right.
And the elevators, which are at the midpoint, obviously, of the floor, as I understand it, are completely destroyed.
Right.
So that whole southern half of the corridor, where our office was and your office was, is just gone. But the fire department got there pretty quickly. I think they arrived at something like 2:19, when the break-in, I think, has been timed at 2:02, something like that.
Yeah.
And they got those fires put out, not in time to really save much of anything in James's office.
Yeah.
But in time, so that in our office, Kendall, the fire didn't get through the wall. But what we did have was with like 2 inches of water on the floor.
Yeah, exactly. That's what they say in fires, that a lot of it is smoke damage and water damage.
Exactly.
Right.
But, I know we're talking about our offices, but I think about the poor folks that are trying to earn a living in that building. Over 20 or so
Absolutely.
small businesses and clinical practices
Right.
are out of this situation, out of their environment. Their patients are going to have to go someplace else
Right.
because this is their way of communicating to us.
I was in the office to pick up a few items from my office inside what used to be the American Experiment offices, like a copy of our budget, for example, off my desk, things like that. And as I was on the way out, and it's just a mess. They have these big tubes in that they're putting air to try to dry it out. And there's electrical cords. There's all kinds of stuff going on. There's plastic hanging down and so on. And as I'm walking out, almost to the exit to the building, there's a guy walking in. He's looking around and trying to figure out what's going on. And I stop and I say, can I help you? And he says, well, do you know where Dr. So-and-so's office is? And I say, hey, man, there isn't anybody. This building is shut.
Yeah.
And it's going to be shut probably for something like a year. There isn't any doctor here. And but he was just bewildered.
Yes.
And I kind of let him back out of the office. So somebody apparently forgot to tell somebody's patients, that they
Right.
they didn't have their appointments after all.
Well, what's frustrating about this is that we've seen this type of behavior in Minneapolis almost go unpunished.
Yeah.
As if it's legitimate a way of communicating disapproval with with an organization, with someone else's viewpoint, not realizing how much disruptive it is to these people's lives.
Yeah.
This is not normative, and we've let it pass.
Kendall, I think you're absolutely right about that. I think you're right too about all the psychologists and the financial advisors and the chiropractors and all these people that were in that building. They've all been disrupted. So whoever did this, it seems obvious that they targeted the 3 conservative organizations in the building, which the 3 of us run. But they didn't just impact the 3 conservative organizations. They impacted a lot more than that. And when the final tab is added up, I mean, millions and millions and millions of dollars worth
Absolutely.
of
And
damage.
let me add that our organizations deal in ideas. So whatever these arsonists were trying to prove by targeting us, they're not going to stop our work. But what they have done is really hurt these people who have physical presences in the office because they need people to come to their office to service their particular needs, like the doctor's office you just mentioned. And so the saddest thing about this situation, other than, the most frustrating thing is that we were targeted, I think. But the saddest thing is, as you just mentioned, that all these folks who have a need to be at a physical presence with patients and clients who expect to be able to go there and who have plans and those things get totally disrupted, they're the ones who are going to suffer the most dislocation and disruption from this, unfortunately.
Yes.
So if your office totally burns up, it's pretty obvious what needs to be replaced. Kendall, your office is like ours on the ground floor, and so you had a lot of water. You had furniture standing in that water for a week or 2 before it got dried out. And then you got smoke, everything's smoky.
Right. Do
you have an understanding as to how much of the contents of the TakeCharge office is going to be salvageable?
Maybe a few pieces of furniture, that type of thing. We had our magazines that we send out to over 7,000 people, and we get daily requests for those to come in. But all of those are gone. I mean, you're looking at hundreds of of copies of those that we're going to have to replace. Just copy machines, printers, that type of thing. We still need to validate and see if those are still recoverable.
Right.
The insurance companies are going through the offices, they're evaluating the damage, they're deciding what can be salvaged, what can't. So far, I have not worked with them very much. As far as I can tell, they're doing a good job, doing a professional job. Have you guys worked with them any more than I have?
I have quite a bit, yeah. I mean, I've been talking to the folks at Service Master who have been helping us inventory things, which is really helpful, and I really appreciate the work they're doing so far. And our adjuster with our insurance company has also been very professional, and I think that they're going through things the right way. I know that the landlord is the primary insured on these policies because it's their building. But in terms of our business personal property, I think that the insurance company that we're working with so far is doing a great job.
Well, I haven't. We run a lean operation. We're, as you know, we're a nonprofit. We run a lean operation. So not only am I like the office manager and the fundraiser and then the writer for op-eds and all these different things. On the list, at the bottom of the list is I need to catch up with the insurance adjuster. So I've relied on our shared service, our network of people within the office, Peter, to really help with that.
Yeah, one of my staff people has done most of that. I do need to circle back at some point here with the insurance company and get up to speed. But so far, I focused a little bit more on the investigation, which frankly is a little more interesting to me
I think so.
than the insurance issues. And
believe me, it is more interesting. I can tell you from having
Well,
dealt with insurance issues.
We'll move on. We'll move on, James. And I think what a lot of our viewers and listeners probably want to hear about is who the heck did this? How's the investigation coming? And maybe a good way to start on that is by pointing out that when the first responders came to the site, Golden Valley Fire Department, Golden Valley Police, I think maybe somebody else, Hennepin County, it was immediately obvious that this was an arson. When you've got one fire on the ground floor and a completely separate, distinct fire on the third floor, that's not a natural occurrence. And I think it was immediately obvious. I think there may have been some containers left behind, but again, the fact that gasoline had been used as an accelerant was immediately obvious. So from the very beginning, they called in the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and the FBI. They've been on the case almost from the very beginning, and they split up the investigation so that ATF was doing the fire investigation per se, whereas the FBI is trying to catch the culprits.
Right.
And it's interesting because that building, what's the vintage of those buildings? It's 60s?
60s or 70s, I think, those small windows.
And they were grandfathered enough so that they don't have to have sprinklers.
Exactly.
And frankly, that turned out to be a good thing because the sprinklers would have done more damage in our office.
For your office,
yours.
yes.
Not yours, James, but
Definitely
in our
ours,
offices,
yes.
the sprinklers would have increased the damage. They also don't seem to have had a lot of cameras and other kinds of security devices. The only camera footage I know of inside the building that actually saw one of the arsonists was in our office.
Okay.
We had a camera that was mounted in the ceiling, pointed at the door. And they didn't break the door down. They didn't come into the office. So that camera didn't catch them doing that. But there was a glass panel, just a narrow, 6 or 8 inch wide glass panel, vertical next to the door. And our camera did capture one of the arsonists going past the glass panel and setting something down right in front of our door and then getting up and walking back the other way.
Wow.
So that image has been out there again from the beginning. Let me ask you this question, Kendall. I just said arsonists, and I tend to talk in the plural. I visualize this crime being carried out by two people, not one person. What do you think about that?
Well, absolutely. At least two.
Two or more.
Yeah, two or more. When you think about the nature of and how bold this is of something to take on, and then carrying gas cans and all that, that's not a one-person job. It's not a one-man job.
James, what do you think?
I mean, it seems like it's probably more than one. I'm just speculating, right?
Yeah.
But I'll go ahead and speculate that it's probably more than one. And My understanding is that there might have also been a camera outside, which may have seen some entry and exit of some of the of perpetrators. So I don't know if there's more than one. I haven't gathered that specifically, but that's what I've heard.
Yeah, I don't know about that, and I haven't seen any such footage, so that may very well be.
Well, I know there's a dome. As you go into the front door of the building, there's a dome of a camera dome that's right at the ceiling there.
Right.
Don't know if they captured anything in the corridor or not.
Yeah, I don't know either.
These people broke in the south door,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And the way that this building is laid out, 8421 Wayzata Boulevard was the address, right? And Wayzata Boulevard at that point is just a frontage road. 394 is the big highway. Wayzata is just a frontage road. Right. And behind our building was a small lake. And I loved that because my office is on the ground floor. I looked out on that lake. I'd see ducks coming in and landing and goldfinches flying around. And, you have to shoo wild turkeys out of the way to get in the door.
That's true.
But obviously, if you're going to break into that building, that's where you'd want to do it. You'd want it because that's sheltered, screened from the road and so forth. But the other thing about that layout is you can't really get to that building without driving on Wayzata Boulevard.
Right.
Unless you let to paddle a canoe across that.
There's no other way. You're right.
Yeah.
You got to drive on Wayzata Boulevard. You could park a little ways away, but then of course you're carrying gas cans around in the middle of the night. And you don't really want to be spotted doing that either, right? And so the first question that I asked the FBI agent who's in charge of the investigation when I talked to him on the telephone was, are there cameras on Wayzata Boulevard? Have you guys talked to the FBI folks about that?
I have talked to him, but I haven't specifically talked about that issue. But maybe have you gathered anything from that question?
Yeah, I want to be careful not to get out ahead of anything that's been made public in the investigation. But I will simply say this: there are cameras on Wayzata Boulevard and cameras off Wayzata Boulevard, so that if you get a vehicle driving east on Wayzata Boulevard and it's
1:30 in the morning,
at 2 o'clock in the morning, exactly. And he gets off at Louisiana Avenue or something, you could follow him, and without saying more. I believe that these perpetrators are going to be caught. I think the FBI is making real progress in the investigation, and I think they're going to catch them. Another thing that they've done, and whether this will bear fruit, I don't know, but nowadays cell phones are so ubiquitous. You know, if these perpetrators were foolish enough to bring their cell phones anywhere near our building, they'd be the only ones, right? There's no other cell phones there at 2 o'clock in the morning.
There's no apartment buildings around there, so it's just there's offices right there.
Right.
I'm actually surprised they haven't uploaded it on YouTube and have some kind of pranking joke about it.
Right.
Like all the rest of these guys do. So they're one level up from sophistication of their execution on this than the average prankster and around this. So there was malice toward what they were doing and who they were targeting.
Yeah, that seems clear. I think, once these people are caught, we'll find out who they are and what exactly their motives were and so forth. It's probably pointless to speculate in advance of the arrests.
Agreed.
I guess all I can say is there were, 25 or 30 businesses in that building, and they targeted 3 of them. And we're sitting right here,
Yeah.
So I guess that animus
homeless,
would seem to be obvious, but who knows? Who knows? We'll see when they actually get caught. So I guess the next question is what comes next?
Well, let me say, I don't know if you all have experienced this at all, but jumping a little back to motives and things like that. And I don't know. I'm sure people who are pranksters on Facebook wouldn't necessarily be outing themselves, but as a result, after this, after the news broke, I'd say the vast majority of people have been very supportive of us and have been, offering support from both sides of the political aisle. I think this has been roundly condemned by most, but there have been some. Specifically, the Antifa folks, there's one group, I guess, out in Alexandria, which may just be one person. But this person, who's a part of the Alexandria Antifa, which is a fascist group, by the way. It's kind of funny. They call themselves anti-fascist to shut down speech and ideas, right? But they've been posting. They were, for a while, posting things on one of our board members' Facebook page, harassing her and then harassing one of our attorneys as well. And I just thought, the kind of mentality to do that is just beyond understanding.
That group sent us a message too,
Did they?
personally to me as well. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Well, yeah, and we forwarded it on to authorities.
Yeah,
Directly.
What else are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
You know, it's so crazy. If you are active on the conservative side of issues and you're out there in the public view, you're going to receive a certain number of threats,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
You know, we all get a certain amount of hate mail. We all get a certain number of threats of violence and whatever it may be. And I know our organization passed on, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 of those that have been relatively recent to the FBI. It could have been one of those people, but I kind of doubt it. You know, I feel like the sorts of people that do the online threats and so on, very different from the people that actually get the cans of gasoline and try to burn down your building.
That's right.
You know.
Oh, yes. And you know, the concerning thing is, you know, we live in a state where, and I don't want to put this on the opposition, just people that don't agree with our views. They control everything.
Right.
They control academia.
Right.
They control the governorship, the state house. And again, this is not a political party that I'm pointing at, but from the mindset standpoint, if the people that they would disagree with are all us, we have no seats of power anywhere in the state.
Right.
And so it's not enough just to control all facets of power. We have to shut these guys up completely.
But we're seeing that all over, aren't we, Kendall? I mean, the mission of the left is not to out-argue us or come up with facts that rebut our arguments. Their mission is to shut us up.
Yeah.
I mean, we see that everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, we bring lawsuits because of retaliation against political speech, because of deprivation of political speech all the time.
But Kendall, I want to go back to a point you made because I think it needs to be reinforced. And like you said, James, you know, people have been very supportive of our organizations. Very few people are pro-arson. You know? I mean, Governor Walls tweeted, you know, there's no room for political violence in Minnesota. I appreciate that. You know, the Star Tribune editorial board, they ran an editorial and they denounced this arson. They quoted Bill Walsh, our communications director, extensively in that article, and I appreciate that. I think that's entirely appropriate, and I think people have responded, you know, as they should. But there's an underlying issue, though, Kendall, which I think you put your finger on, and that is that over the last, say, 3 years, since starting with the George Floyd riots, and maybe a little bit before that even, there has been a growing feeling in this state that these people on the left, can get away with anything.
Right.
They can get away with anything. I mean, what punishment was ever meted out for burning down the 3rd Precinct Station House, for example?
None. I think the only thing that I see consistent, and this is just my opinion, is that we have more targeted attempts to target the police officers than we do criminals.
Yeah.
And we have just another case that's happening here in the last couple of weeks. But in regards to accountability for destruction of property, all these different things, there seems to be a pass for it, or a slap on the wrist.
Yeah, and I do think that's part of the picture. And again, we'll find out when they catch the perpetrators.
Right.
That'll give us a lot more information. But I have to think that the fact that we've seen a lot of fires in the Twin Cities in the last 3 or 4 years, right?
Right.
A lot of fire has been set.
I mean, mostly peaceful protests, right?
Yeah, the mostly peaceful protest. The reporter, you know, out there, the famous shot with the burning building in the background. And I have to think that it's likely that whoever did this was emboldened in part by that experience and that history.
You send a loud message by just the behaviors that you allow and the behaviors that you don't.
Yeah.
It sends a clear signal. Even little children know the difference.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I want to go back to just a little bit about this fire, and especially, you know what, our friends on the left always makes a race about everything. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But this was not too long ago in our history of our country when there was a fire in the middle of the night targeting a black person or their business, their family, their homes. It was ominous with something bad, targeted, and something we don't know. And there used to be a lot of press behind it. Today, there was nothing. Basically, a drop. Now we did get news coverage around it, just a beep. But the fake news gets more attention from what we saw at St. Olaf a few years ago when our kids were there.
Right.
What the Jesse Smollett case, he made the rounds on all the news shows with a fake case.
Hey,
Right.
Kendall, have you been on Good Morning America?
No.
James, how about you?
Nope,
I've been
nope.
on some news shows, but it's like Dennis Prager and Hugh Hewitt,
Yeah.
and
Right.
the Daily Wire,
Right.
people like that.
Right, right. It's a different standard, and it's hypocrisy at its highest.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And you referred to we have these alleged hate incidents on college campuses. Well, I don't know if anybody's ever tried to figure out the statistics, but it seems like the overwhelming majority of them turned out to be
That's
hoaxes,
right.
like
Right.
the one at St. Olaf did a few
That's right.
years ago. So, well, let's move on and talk a little bit about the future because it appears that these fires were set with a view toward damaging our organizations, disrupting our operations,
Right.
maybe putting us out of business. So, Kendall, I'll start with you. What impact are you seeing?
Well, if anything, it has heightened our resolve. It has made us even more emboldened to get our message out, but even more so with even action. So right now we have issues, especially in the Black community, where our kids are not getting the education they deserve. I mean, over 10 years of this education gap or achievement gap, they call it, where kids are graduating. Even if they do graduate high school, they're graduating 3-4 grade levels below reading capability.
Yeah.
They're semi-literate.
Right.
And so we're going to start, private schools in these communities around the metro and greater Minnesota. We're going to start these and we're going to launch them in the fall to complement what we've been doing and the grassroots movement that we've gotten just in the Black community to help take the culture back away from what it was before we had help from the government.
Right.
It's interesting that we had kids performing better in academic schools before and right during the civil rights movement than they are today.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. That's a wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful initiative.
So how about you, James? Are you seeing significant disruption from having your office burned to a crisp?
I'm working remotely, but again, as I mentioned before, we all deal in ideas. The idea that you could physically, take down organizations that are dealing in ideas is kind of stupid in the first place. But no, last week I filed a brief, which might have been one of the best briefs we've ever filed to the Minnesota Supreme Court in our challenge to the legislature's recent law that allows for felons who have not completed their sentences to vote. I also argued the same week last week that Governor Walz didn't have the authority to declare an emergency in the Minnesota Supreme Court as well. So we've been going, full on without any kind of interruption. I mean, sure, I have to go to a coffee shop or, work from, this part of my house or that part of my house to every now and then instead of going into the office to collaborate. But with the ability to work, interface with people on video conferencing apps and to be able to work from pretty much anywhere these days as a law firm, it hasn't slowed us down at all. And guess what? All of our files, I hate paper, so all of our files are in the cloud. It makes no difference.
If I could tell a quick story here, I don't remember if either of you guys. Well, you certainly were not around in 1981, James.
No, I was not. I was
Not
not.
even born in 1981.
I was not.
Kendall. But I was around in 1981 for the Great Thanksgiving Day fire when the Northwestern National Bank building was inadvertently set on fire on Thanksgiving Day by a couple of kids who were fooling around, set a bonfire up against the side of the building in a construction zone because a department store had been demolished there. They crawled over a fence, started a fire, roasted some marshmallows or something and left. And the fire wound up completely destroying the Northwestern National Bank building. And that's where the Wells Fargo Center is today. Well, my law firm had the 13th and 14th floors in that building.
Wow.
And this is before computers.
Oh, wow.
And so everything was on paper.
Yeah.
Everything was in files. And the fire department managed to stop that fire on those upper stories right at the midway point,
Okay.
in
Wow.
the middle of those floors. So basically half of our files were cinders, but the other half survived. And so all the able-bodied young guys in the office showed up the next morning, and we somehow, I don't know how we got in, but we did, and they let us in, and we climbed up the stairs, and we physically made trip after trip after trip, 13 or 14 stories,
Wow.
carrying out as many files as we could. And for the next couple of months, one of our big tasks was working with courts and with opposing counsel or
Right.
co-counsel to reconstruct files. Because you needed paper,
Right. Yes.
You needed the paper, and one of the things that we're seeing with this fire, my career has kind of been bookended by fires, is everybody works off a laptop.
Yeah.
And we've got a virtual filing system that's, I don't know where it is. It's in the cloud somewhere, where documents and whatnot are retained, and so I don't see much disruption at all of our activities. But what I do see is we're a collaborative organization.
Right.
I think we had 22 people in that office on Wayzata Boulevard. And if we work remotely for very long, we can do it for a while.
Yeah.
But if we do it for very long, the wheels are going to start to come off. You lose something when you're not together, you're not
I
talking
agree.
to people,
Right.
you're not collaborating with
Right.
people. So one of our objectives is to get into new permanent space as soon as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, we share that too. I mean, we will also get into a new permanent space soon, and I think the collaboration aspect is really important. So we're trying to recreate that, right? But you're kind of faking it till you make it at this point, with where everything's at with the fire. But I think it's sooner rather than later we'll be back at doing something like that.
Yeah, I totally agree, and you're right. We do work collaboratively, not only in the office, but when we go out and we meet people throughout the state of Minnesota.
Yeah.
And it's a really an educational forum. I don't know any other organizations that do the work that our three organizations do independently, but also as a cross collaboration as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that was one of the nice things about being in that building, all three organizations, because we do collaborate a lot.
Yeah.
Over the recent years, it's been kind of remarkable. Well, I don't want to give away. We are right now negotiating for new space, and it's going to be better space. It's going to be much newer, much nicer, and frankly, better laid out for us. I think the fire is going to work out well for us in the medium term, let alone the long term. I think our office is going to be in that new space, I think sometime around April 1. I don't want to give out the address because I don't want to give ideas to anybody who might want to duplicate what they did on Wayzata Boulevard.
Yeah.
But Kendall, how about you?
Yeah, we're looking to to go into a permanent location as well as soon as we can. One of the things the fire does it slows down what we're doing. We're not as efficient as we normally are, so it does. We have that burden to bear, but we're looking to get reestablished and settled quickly.
Yeah, it's great.
And James, I think you're going to be with us once again in all probability, right? I think we're going to find ourselves in the same building.
It's possible. It's possible.
Well, I hope so. I hope so, because our organizations have worked together so closely and so well. I hope it's easier when you're physically nearby. Yeah. So I hope that works out.
Right, and we'll make sure that there's lots of cameras.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, I think that's no matter even though our resolve has almost doubled, I'd say, as Kendall put it earlier. I mean, we're not in the business of making ourselves targets either.
Right.
So we are certainly taking countermeasures to make sure that in the future, anyone who even would think about doing this is going to be dealing with perhaps a much faster investigation leading to their arrest and conviction. Even than this one, which I think is still going pretty well.
I think it's going well. I think they're going to arrest the perpetrators, and maybe when that happens, we can get together again and talk about who did it and why and what it all means.
Yeah,
with the presumption of innocence until proven guilty, of course.
Spoken like a true lawyer.
I have to.
I used to be a true lawyer, but hey, that was your.
Hey, I'm litigating for liberty and individual rights. I have to, make sure I'm holding that line.
All right. Well, with that, we'll leave it for today. Thanks, Kendall. Thanks, James.
Thanks
for having us. Yeah. Thank you.